Shaquille O'Neal once looked unstoppable, a giant who shattered backboards, bullied defenders, and turned basketball into pure destruction. Crowds screamed his name. Arenas shook when he dunked. To the world, he looked invincible. But what happens when the noise fades? What happens when one of the strongest athletes alive is left alone with pain, silence, and the weight of his own body? Behind the fame and laughter is a story far heavier than most people realize. And the truth is, the hardest battles of Shaq's life didn't happen on a basketball court. 4 years, Shaq's massive frame was his greatest weapon. At 7 feet 1 inch and over 300 pounds, he overwhelmed everyone in front of him. Defenders bounced off him like children. Backboards cracked under the force of his dunks. He didn't just dominate basketball. He changed it forever. But every collision came with a price. Every hard fall. Every twist of the knees. Every pounding step across 19 brutal NBA seasons slowly damaged the body that made him famous. And eventually, that damage caught up to him. Retirement made things worse. Without the daily grind of professional training, Shaq's weight climbed past 400 pounds. His hips hurt constantly. His knees weakened. Even simple movement became painful. But the scariest problem happened while nobody was watching. Shaq developed severe sleep apnea. Night after night, he stopped breathing in his sleep over and over again. Imagine that for a second. One of the most powerful athletes in history struggling just to breathe at night. The giant who once controlled entire arenas now depended on a CPAP machine beside his bed. And that's where the story becomes heartbreaking. Because how does someone built to feel unstoppable accept becoming fragile? The quiet moments hit hardest. The crowds were gone. The cheers disappeared. In their place came silence. Long nights. Empty rooms. The mechanical sound of an oxygen machine. Shaq later admitted that his body was breaking down faster than he expected. Rehabilitation became painful and exhausting. Every step reminded him that time eventually defeats everyone. But even then, he refused to quit. And that refusal came from a childhood filled with struggle long before the fame arrived. Shaquille O'Neal was born in Newark, New Jersey, in 1972. His biological father left early, leaving Shaq's mother, Lucille, to raise him in difficult conditions. Money was tight. Life was unstable. Even as a small child, Shaq stood out because of his enormous size. At just 3 years old, bus drivers reportedly thought he was much older because he was already so big. He couldn't blend in. People stared at him everywhere he went. But the deepest void wasn't his size. It was the absence of his father. And that wound stayed with him for years. Everything changed when Army Sergeant Philip Harrison entered his life as his stepfather. Harrison brought strict discipline into the household. Tough love. Military rules. Hard structure. Some days felt cold and unforgiving, but Shaq later credited him for saving his life. Harrison believed the streets could destroy a young boy without discipline, especially one as physically gifted as Shaq. So he pushed him constantly. Early morning workouts. Endless drills. Demanding standards. But here's the part many people miss. Shaq wasn't just training for basketball. He was chasing approval. Chasing love. Chasing the feeling that he mattered. By 14, Shaq had already grown to 6'8" with a size 17 shoe. He looked like a grown man trapped inside a teenager's life. Basketball became his escape. On the court, his size finally felt useful instead of awkward. And once he realized what he could do, there was no stopping him. But success brought a different kind of pressure. Because the bigger Shaq became, the harder it became to fail. Then came 1992. The NBA witnessed something it had never seen before. Shaquille O'Neal entered the league as the #1 draft pick for the Orlando Magic, and from the very beginning, he looked unreal. He wasn't just strong. He was explosive. Fast. Violent near the rim. Backboards literally shattered from his dunks. Arenas had to reinforce equipment because of him. Think about that. One player was so dominant that the league itself had to adjust. But here's where things became even stranger. Basketball alone wasn't enough for Shaq. While dominating the NBA, he exploded into pop culture. He released rap albums, starred in movies, appeared everywhere on television. Fans loved his humor, his giant personality, and his larger-than-life confidence. Shaq wasn't just an athlete anymore. He became a global celebrity. Yet underneath all the fame, something still bothered him. Championships, validation, legacy. He wanted more than popularity. He wanted greatness nobody could question. That hunger eventually pushed him to Los Angeles in 1996. The Lakers offered him a massive contract, but they also paired him with a young, fearless player named Kobe Bryant. At first, the partnership looked perfect. Shaq was overwhelming power. Kobe was relentless ambition. Together, they became unstoppable. 3 straight championships from 2000 to 2002. Shaq collected Finals MVP trophies. The Lakers became basketball royalty. But behind the scenes, tension quietly grew. Both men wanted control. Both demanded greatness. And slowly, the partnership turned into a rivalry hiding beneath championships. Locker rooms became colder. Public interviews carried subtle shots at each other. The pressure of maintaining dominance poisoned the relationship. Still, they kept winning, which almost made the situation more tragic. Because how do two people accomplish so much together while drifting so far apart? Eventually, the Lakers chose Kobe as the future. In 2004, Shaq was traded to Miami. Just like that, a dynasty ended. For Shaq, the move felt deeply personal. Los Angeles had become his kingdom. Now he was packing up memories, trophies, and years of his life into boxes. The giant who once ruled the NBA suddenly felt replaceable. And even though he later won another championship in Miami, something had changed inside him. Years later, Shaq and Kobe finally repaired their relationship. Fans loved seeing them laugh together again. The bitterness seemed gone. They looked like brothers reconnecting after years apart. But then came 2020. Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash, shocking the world. And Shaq completely broke down. During Kobe's memorial, his voice cracked through tears as he spoke about losing his little brother. It was one of the rare moments where the giant looked completely defenseless. No jokes. No confidence. Just grief. That loss forced Shaq to confront something painful. Fame doesn't stop death. Success doesn't protect relationships. And no amount of championships can undo lost time. But the hardest truths were still waiting at home. For years, Shaq tried to build the family life he never had growing up. He married Shawnee O'Neal, and together they raised a large blended family. At first, it looked like everything he dreamed of. Success, children, stability. But fame came with constant travel, business deals, and endless distractions. Slowly, emotional distance crept into the household. Shawnee later described him as physically present but emotionally absent, a flickering ghost inside his own home. And that description haunted people because it revealed the loneliness hidden beneath Shaq's larger-than-life image. In 2011, the marriage ended. The divorce hurt far more than fans realized. Shaq admitted later that many mistakes were his own. And losing daily connection with his children hit him harder than losing any basketball game ever could. For a man abandoned by his biological father, the fear of failing his own family became overwhelming. But life wasn't finished testing him. In 2018, his son Shaquille was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Suddenly, none of the fame mattered anymore. Shaq found himself sitting in hospital hallways facing a problem he couldn't overpower. No dunk could fix it. No money could erase the fear. And that experience changed him deeply. It forced him to slow down, to focus on being present instead of simply being successful. But could one of the busiest celebrities in sports really rebuild the relationships he nearly lost? After retirement, Shaq entered one of the hardest periods of his life. The games were over. The spotlight faded. His massive house grew quiet. He often found himself alone, trying to understand who he was without basketball. That identity crisis hit harder than people expected. Because for decades, Shaq's entire existence revolved around dominance. Suddenly, there were no arenas,
No roaring crowds.
just silence and reflection. At the same time, his health continued declining. Chronic pain followed him daily. Sleep apnea disrupted his nights. His body felt heavier and weaker. But then something shifted. Shaq realized he wanted more time with his children, more life, more purpose. So he began fighting back. He changed his habits, lost more than 50 pounds over several years, focused on rebuilding relationships, focused on survival. And strangely enough, the strongest thing Shaq ever did may not have happened during his NBA career at all. Because true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's waking up and choosing to keep going when your body hurts. Sometimes it's admitting regret. Sometimes it's facing loneliness instead of hiding behind fame. Shaquille O'Neal once conquered basketball through sheer physical power. But life demanded something completely different from him. Vulnerability, humility, endurance. Today, Shaq remains one of the most recognizable athletes in the world. Fans still remember the dunks, the championships, and the larger-than-life personality. But behind the smile is a man still carrying pain, loss, and lessons learned the hard way. The unstoppable giant eventually discovered that even legends are human. And maybe that's why his story still resonates so deeply. Because beneath all the fame and greatness is something surprisingly relatable. A man trying to heal. A father trying to reconnect. A giant learning how to live beyond the spotlight. And in the end, that may be the most powerful victory of all.